Hi, guys. Did you see it coming that Nevrescu was going to be Margaret's dad? Because I did not. I will not lie. I did not see that coming at all. So I was so excited to get to that twist. We are reading today chapters 28 and 29. They're both quite short. Chapter 28 is called The Cavalry Arrives. The FBI was coming to rescue me. Nevrescu's henchmen were scrambling to get away from the barn. Chaos was everywhere, but I didn't hear a thing. I was so focused on Nevrescu's tattoo and the realization that he was Margaret's birth father. You weren't at the soccer game to see me, I said. You were there to see her. She was amazing in that game, wasn't she? He said. She's amazing in everything she does, I told him. I ran through the timeline in my head. And when we were at the embassy, I wasn't the one you recognized. It was her. She was standing right next to me. You must understand that I'm a bad person, he said. But she is not. She is only good. Nothing can ever connect her to me. That's for her safety. All the pieces started coming together. 12 years ago, you weren't a criminal. You were a student at Georgetown. Is that where you met her mother? Her birth mother? My family would not accept the relationship. They would not accept an African-American daughter-in-law, an African-American granddaughter. So I had to make a choice. I had to become this man in exchange for my family looking away from them. I tell you this so you understand how far I will go to protect Margaret. You cannot tell anyone. Well, then you're going to have to help me come up with an explanation as to what we're doing here, I said, because the FBI is going to want to know how we ended up together. Both of us sat there for a moment, breathing heavily, trying to figure out a solution. I knew the FBI would be there any moment. I pictured my caseboard in my mind, and I drew a line through all the dots. I connected all the small pieces, and then I saw it. I know who did it, I exclaimed. I know who stole Woman with a Parasol. It was not me, he said. No, it wasn't, I said. You had nothing to do with it. That's how I know who did it. We could now hear cars arriving outside the barn. It was only a matter of seconds before the agents burst into the barn. You can help me in a way that will help both of us. Nevrescu lay face down on the ground and put his hands behind his head so there'd be no trouble when the agents entered. What do I do? He asked. You get EEL to force Pavel Novak to return to America, I said. And you tell everybody that Agent Rivers was not the man at the Romanian embassy. Tell them that you saw a man who looked like him, but it was someone else. That one's a deal breaker. You don't do that, and I'll tell everybody everything, including Margaret. You care about her too much to tell her, he said, but I still agree. The barn door flew open, and a team of federal agents burst in. They wore black riot gear and helmets and had their guns drawn. It was terrifying. In the middle of them all was Agent Rivers. Nicolae Nevrescu, keep your hands behind your head and do not move, he barked, as an agent approached Nevrescu and cuffed him behind his back. Rivers walked straight to me. Are you okay? He said. Don't worry, Marcus, I'm fine. He wrapped me in another hug. This is going to have to stop, he said with a nervous laugh. I signed up for art crime because it was supposed to keep me mellow. Yeah, I agreed, but we've got a lot to talk about. After the dust settled, literally, and the scene had been fully secured by the agents, Nicolae, Marcus, and I were all seated around the wooden picnic table. Only now it was Nick the Knife, whose hands were tied behind his back. You're telling me this was all a misunderstanding? Rivers asked incredulously, after we'd started to fill him in on our version of events. Not all of it, Nicolae said. I asked Gregor to get Florian so that I could help explain that I was innocent, but willing to help solve the mystery. Gregor mistook the request and was too forceful in the manner in which he got Florian. But he was never in danger. This is a special boy, and I would not let anything to happen to him. He looked at me and added, I will not let anything ever happen to him. I realized that he meant what he was saying. I was important to Margaret. He would never have hurt her by hurting me. But the important thing is that we solve the mystery, I said. We know who stole Woman with a Parasol, and Nicolae can help us get Pavel Novak. Of course, Nick said. I have friends in the Czech Republic who owe me a favor. Novak will be on a plane to the United States within 3 days. I guarantee that he'll surrender to the authorities. You know who did it? Rivers asked me. I nodded. Who? I'll tell you when we're alone, but there's one more thing we have to take care of. What's that? Nicolay, do you know this man? I asked as I pointed to Agent Rivers. Did you see him 2 Saturdays ago at the Romanian embassy? Nevrescu gave a performance worthy of an Oscar as he said, I have never seen this man before in my life, and I would testify to that in any court in the land. Chapter 29, A Tiny Piece of Toast. Marcus and I rode along the highway on our way back to Washington. I was still overwhelmed by everything as I looked out at the farms. It's a lot prettier when you're not tied up in the back of a truck, I said. Funny how that works, he replied. I still can't believe I pushed my panic button and you came to rescue me in a hybrid. I was expecting something like a helicopter, or at least one of those bulletproof SUVs. I didn't come because of the panic button, he said. What do you mean? When you didn't show up at home, I started looking for you on my own, tracking you with your Smart Trip card, he explained. You got everybody else when you pushed the panic button. I was already on my way. I bet you didn't even go over the speed limit, I said. Speed limits are there for a reason, he said. Safety's important. Then he cracked a smile and added, although I may have gone over it by like 40 miles an hour. Well, thanks, I said. You've rescued me twice in 2 weeks. That's got to be some sort of record. And you said you were going to tell me who did it, he reminded me. So spill. I need to explain something first, and you have to promise that you won't tell anyone. I promise no such thing, he said. 45 minutes ago, I told a very scary man that I wouldn't tell this to anybody, so I need to make sure it stays a secret. You have to promise. Let me explain how this works, Marcus said to me. If you trust me with a secret, that means you trust my judgment with regard to the information. Not that you get to dictate that judgment for me. If we're going to work together, we're going to have to be able to think along those lines. You still want to work with me? I asked. Even after all this? I know, crazy, isn't it? Okay, you don't have to promise, but please use your best judgment. Always, he said. It all starts with Margaret's soccer game. I explained to him all about the search for Margaret's birth parents and the fact that Nevrescu was her father. When I was done, he shook his head in amazement. Wow, he said. That's a secret I can keep. That's something we need to protect her from. Agreed, I said. And from that you were able to determine who stole a woman with a parasol? Yes, thanks to you. What did I do? That day at Quantico, you set a trap for me. I reached into the glove compartment and saw that the nail polish was still there. I took it out and held it up for him to see. You left clues like this that were too irresistible for me to ignore, I said. Then you told me that my biggest vulnerability was that if someone knew I was on a case, they could set a trap. And that's exactly what someone did. We continued to drive as I laid it all out for him. That's the end of the chapter. The next chapter, chapter 30, is called The Solution. There are actually 2 more chapters left in the book, and I will finish them next week. Have a good one.